Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's main meeting of the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. We have with us Grant Fritchey of Redgate Software, who's going to talk to us all about development and operations and the portmanteau of the two. So take it away, please, Grant.
Awesome. Thank you.
The best
So,
introduction I could give you.
nah, it's perfect, man. No worries. So, this presentation is not meant to be a presentation to database people. This is meant to be a presentation for developers. Um, but I thought about it and I said, you know what? Let me tell you guys what I'm telling them, and we'll see how it goes. And if you the reason we're doing it virtual is because that way you can't throw rocks. So we'll keep going from there. See how it all works out. No, seriously, I think it'll be a useful session. I really hope it will be. There's a lot of stuff, and I want to share it with you guys. My name is Grant Fritchey. I do work for Redgate Software. This is my contact information. If you've got questions after today, I'd love to help out. I have an interesting history of DevOps, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But please don't hesitate to reach out and use this contact information. You have full permission to ask questions. Seek me out. That's about it. Let's get going. Now, again, remember, this is not meant to be targeted to DBAs. It's meant to be targeted to developers. And the reason I like to target the developers is because, well, how best to put this? DBAs are resistant. They fight against this concept. And the thing is that developers, by and large, have already adopted a DevOps approach to a lot of stuff. I've been working on DevOps and doing DevOps for almost, well, a bit more than 15 years as a DBA. And we didn't know it was called DevOps when we started doing it. We just kind of thought it was called our job. But the idea is pretty simple. We need to find a way to work with the development team, work with the business, work with everyone involved in this process to find a way to adopt a DevOps mindset. Not necessarily adopt, DevOps, but adopt the mindset of the elimination of barriers, the automation of anything and everything we possibly can, especially the automation of testing. And so arriving at a place where we can deliver better code faster. And I say code intentionally because at the root, databases are code. And you just kind of have to approach it that way because it is. I mean, I'm assuming, if you're all used to working in T-SQL, you're probably, or sorry, SQL Server, you're probably writing T-SQL. And if you're working in Oracle, you're probably writing PL/SQL. And, MySQL is MySQL. And the fact is that that's code. So, it's the same idea. As we go through today, don't hesitate to stop, ask questions, make comments. Nothing rude, but feel free to share, and we'll keep going as we go along. Kevin will interrupt me, and we'll keep going. So, DevOps has a lot of meaning, and there are people who do it badly, right? It can be done very poorly. So, one of the poorest ways I've seen it done is, well, DevOps means developers get SA privileges. And the fact of the matter is that is just not true. That is not fundamental to DevOps. That is not the appropriate way to do DevOps. It is actually the inappropriate way to do DevOps. DevOps is simply what it says on the screen. It's an agile culture, and culture being one of the most important parts, that supports collaboration between people. So it's focused first on people, right? The culture and the people. And it uses automation and tooling in support of process. That's what DevOps is about. And so it's not about, well, we get to do anything we want to production, but you're still on call and have to handle everything. That's just not DevOps. That's not how it's implemented in the right shops. That's not how it's been successfully implemented in places. It's more about this concept of that agile culture supporting collaboration. But as DBAs, things are hard, right? There's all kinds of issues. And so there's a lot of conflict in terms of communication. And there is a lack of protection. The seawall can be seen as coming down, and it's absolutely not true. And the tooling is hard, frankly. Funny enough, most of the time, anytime you talk about implementing a DevOps culture, the people will talk, well, the culture of the people, that's the hard part. The tooling is easy. And I even used to say that as recently as about 6 months ago. I was constantly saying, well, it's the people that's the hard part and the tooling is easy. But I've come around on that. And in fact, the tooling's a giant pain. And I work for a tool company, right? I work for a vendor. I want to sell you as many tools as I possibly can, but I'm telling you, it's kind of hard to implement. And there's some reasons, and we're going to talk about it. But I assure you, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. But let's talk first about that firewall. Let's talk first about that, stopping and holding back the ocean, because when I talk about being a DBA, when I talk about being a database administrator, I think about all the problems that I have as a DBA. And it's a long, long, long list, right there. It is just a challenging position, from simple stuff like the fact that Microsoft can't seem to slow down software releases anymore. So they're releasing new versions, they're releasing patches, they're releasing cumulative updates. And I've got to get those into production, because if I don't, I'm risking the business, because most of those things are security related. I'm sweating my backups. I mean, if you're not sweating your backups, if you're 100% confident that your backups are flawless, probably means you haven't tested them recently, because frequently I used to find, even though I had fully automated every single backup and fully automated every single backup check and the log backups and everything else, every once in a while there was that database that for whatever reason wasn't getting backed up. And you know how we always found the one that wasn't getting backed up? Yeah, that was the one that went corrupt, or the one that somebody dropped a table on, or some other awful thing happened to. I've got to sweat bad code. And when I say bad code, I don't just mean T-SQL code. I'm sweating bad implementations of Entity Framework. I'm sweating all kinds of different stuff. And those things keep me up at night. Frankly, the structures on our databases aren't that good. Either I built the database when I was asleep or younger, because we all know that the stuff we did 10 years ago was bad, and it's much better now. But 10 years ago, we were idiots. Now we're so much better. But regardless, I've got all that stuff, or I've got the horrific stuff that comes out of letting, in Hibernate design databases, which should never be done. And then frankly, we're messing up our servers on a regular basis. There's no way you get the configuration right, no matter how much you script it. And then finally, as a database administrator, please, please, please stop the change. Stop it all. I don't want to change anything. I've got it all propped up. The glue is there. There's a little bit of spit, a little bit of baling wire, and a lot of duct tape. And if we just don't breathe hard near it, everything will be okay. But no, no, no. We need to keep changing things. And it says because of you, but I mean because of developers. And that's not true, though. Developers are just a symptom. The issue is the fact that business is constantly changing and there's no escaping it. And so we've got some justification for why we feel this way, right? It's not that we're, somehow just completely crazy. No, pretty much, 2.7 million people in Sweden, games, Twitter, the Marriott hacking. I mean, you can go in there right now and look up. There's a breach within the last week, guaranteed, if not 3 or 4. There's a giant breach within the last 2 weeks, if not 3 or 4. And frankly, that stuff is what scares the heck out of us day in and day out. And so why do we not want to automate change? Well, heck, we don't want to do change at all, but automating change means exposing ourselves to more possibilities of this mess. And so, yeah, we don't want to do anything. And add to that to the fact that there's a lot of issues around around DevOps that people give out bad information. And I mean bad information. And so let's talk about some of the bad information and frankly, just state outright, these are all lies. So one of the things I always hear, DevOps only works for new systems. And it is patently false. It is just false. You can implement DevOps on an existing system. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that you've already built the system. It doesn't matter that it's 3 years old, 10 years old. You can still implement DevOps processes around it. Yeah, are there going to be extra little issues, extra little gotchas? Yeah, maybe. And there may be bits or pieces that you can't easily automate, and you'll have to work around those. But there's nothing in DevOps or the DevOps methodology that says, well, this will only work on new systems. Matter of fact, there's a lot of old systems that could benefit from being able to deploy more frequently, that could benefit from having, a better way to test the code before it goes out the door. So it's certainly not only for new systems. Now, the other one you hear all the time is, well, it just means SA for developers. And you only hear this from idiots, just to put it as bluntly as humanly possible. This is not true. The whole idea of DevOps is not that we simply hand the SA password to developers. Heck, if you're dealing with California citizens data, or you're dealing with data from someone in the EU, or some of the other compliance regimes that have come out in the last few years, you can't give SA to the developers as a legal matter, let alone, whether or not it was a silly choice to begin with. So this idea that DevOps means SA for developers is patently false, and it's only really been promoted by people who don't know better, who really think that the problem is the DBA and not the problem is our lack of communication between the teams. The other thing you hear is no ops, and frankly, no ops makes me insane. It's just crazy. And no ops, the idea there is that there's no operations at all, no operations needed. Everything is handled by the development team, and the only thing that you need is a development team, and that's great until the phone starts ringing at 3 a.m. And the weird thing is there's no developers to be found at 3 a.m. They disappear. They're like reverse vampires, only visible in the daytime or something. Sure enough, yeah, okay, maybe there's an operations thing, or your full stack developer who absolutely knows every single bit of code from top to bottom, knows all systems. Yeah, they've never run a backup before. They don't know how to run a restore. Suddenly operations is back in the scene. The idea that there will be no ops is partly supported by the cloud, but even there it's not entirely true. Not entirely true. I'm sorry, that was badly phrased. Even there, it's not remotely true. There's all kinds of operation stuff that's necessary, even if you've moved to the cloud. Matter of fact, moving to the cloud eliminates a lot of boring work, but it adds a whole bunch of extra work that you have to do. So it's not like you're going to go to the cloud and then there's no more operations teams. Some of the silly stuff goes away, but a lot of other work pops up. Another one is DevOps is incompatible with security and compliance. Yeah, well, no. In fact, DevOps enhances security and compliance because you can add additional layers of testing. You can add additional process, and you can ensure that that process goes through an automation methodology so that it's repeatable and therefore documentable, and you can hand it to the compliance team, you can hand it to the security team, and you can say, yep, here we go, this is what we do, this is how it works. I mean, heck, DevOps is so popular with security people that they insist it be called DevSecOps because they need to be involved too. And the fact is, of course, DevOps, everyone is involved, but The concept here is not only not incompatible with security and compliance, it absolutely supports security and compliance. So we just have to get away from this FUD. Agile means no design. Again, not true. Agile means design enough to get through the next few weeks. It doesn't mean that we have to do a waterfall approach, that we can only spend 6 months doing a design before we can start writing code. Okay, fine. But do we need to do 6 months? Do we have to design tables in the structure that we're not going to be coding for the next 9 months? Probably not. It's probably not that important that we get to those, but we've got other stuff that we can work on, and we can design around it. We can sketch in the other areas. We can certainly work through the process. And by the way, as you move into an agile methodology, you can get changes out the door faster. So when you find that, 6 months when we made this one decision, we should have done it slightly differently. Cool. We can just, make that slight change and move forward. I've also heard DevOps is the elimination of process. And whoever came up with this one really wasn't paying attention, because DevOps is not the elimination of process. Successful DevOps requires a stronger, stricter process, a more tight adherence to process, because you can't automate anarchy. You cannot automate, well, we just do whatever, whenever, however. Yeah, okay, cool. Good luck automating that. There's no way to automate that. That means that you do everything manually. And DevOps is the opposite of that. So this concept that it takes process away is just nuts. So all of this FUD, all of this fear and uncertainty and doubt that's been implemented or suggested is part of DevOps, it just is not. And if this is what you're hearing from your dev teams, smack them about the face and neck, because they're wrong. It is absolutely not true. None of this is true. And so if this is what you're hearing, you need to talk to some other people, or bring some other people in to talk to your team, because this is not how it goes. Any questions so far?
We'll see if there are any questions so far. Look like we've got some people who are seconding what you're saying. In fact, testing and low errors are compatible with security.
Yeah, no kidding.
When you sit in the middle of 120 other systems, that also has to make change planning and design. It needs some lead time.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, nothing says that, we're doing DevOps, we have to release 15 times a day. No, doesn't say that. But what it does say is we have to figure out a way to automate what we do, and find processes that allow better collaboration. And so, nothing says that we're tearing down the seawall, right? Nothing says we're tearing down the protection. Cool. All right. So next up, we're going to talk about communication, because DevOps has a series of fundamentals. And so let's talk about the DevOps fundamentals. This is pretty much it, right? In a nutshell, this is what we're talking about. You have to communicate more and better. The concept that we're all on different teams, while from a management standpoint, that all makes sense, from a delivering code safely faster, it doesn't make a lot of sense. We're kind of all on the same team. So we need to have that better communication. We need to talk about the fact that code must go into source control. Databases are code, so therefore they have to go into source control. We also need to talk about the methodologies around shift left. And shift left is really hard, especially when it comes to databases. But the concept is simple. Make your non-production environments look as much like your production environments as you can. That doesn't mean everybody has, a 50 terabyte server sitting under their desk. It's not possible. I mean, especially in these days of COVID, because who the heck's going to deliver all that stuff to all the homes, let alone pay for it? No. But as much as you can, you make your non-production environments look like production. We'll talk some more about that. DevOps also means automated tests. Just flat out automated tests. You've got to automate your testing. You've got to automate your testing. You've got to have lots and lots and lots of automation because you're also going to automate your deployments. And then finally, within DevOps, you need monitoring. You need to see what's happening. You need to not only see how the change is occurring within your systems and how that change affects your systems, that level of monitoring, but you also need to monitor the DevOps process itself. What builds are succeeding, what builds are failing, and other stuff. And we'll get into all that. So let's start with the communication. This is just core. If you can't fix the communication issues, all of the rest is not worth talking about. It's just there's nothing else there. I left a job because I was having a hard time communicating with some of the teams. There were some of the teams I was communicating with just fine, but there were other teams that I was just no longer able to communicate, and so I was no longer effective, no longer being effective. It was time to go. Or maybe get the company to change. But getting a company to change is hard, and so we have to start off with eliminating barriers. Don't think about, well, we're the DBA team, they're the development team, we can't talk to each other. No, take them out for a beer, take them out for a frothy beverage of some kind. Take them out, for whatever. You can't do it anymore because we're all working from home, but have a chat with them, talk to them, share with them, communicate with them, eliminate the barriers between your teams. But more than that, eliminate the barriers with the SAN team, eliminate barriers with the network team, eliminate barriers with the business, eliminate anything that keeps you guys from communicating effectively. Also, find the choke points, whether that's an individual or a process. Track down where you're slowing down. Find that moment where we're not able to communicate, where we're dropping the ball over and over again, and eliminate it, mitigate it, or reduce it. Find that methodology. And remember, no matter what, successful implementation of DevOps does involve all the teams. You, as a DBA, will not be able to implement DevOps by yourself. It ain't going to happen. A given database developer will not implement DevOps by themselves. A given developer will not. A manager will not. We need champions across the board. And that's one thing I always call for, is a champion. Be the champion. Be the one from your team that goes, you know what? This stuff works. It can work. It's successful. We're going to figure out how to make it work here. And you know what? Find the other champions. Find a champion on the dev team. Find a champion in management and talk to these people. Communication is core to DevOps. And so that's one of the first things you have to do, is start talking to one another. So the next thing, source control. Databases are code. You'll never convince me otherwise. Databases are code. And source control is a backup for code. And hey, you know what's better than one backup? Two. You know what's better than two backups? Three. What's better than any of those? A tested backup, which is a restore. But the fact is that recovery of a database is really hard. And there is no undo button in a database. You run a query that alters a store procedure, and you don't know what that looked like before you altered it. It's gone. I mean, sure, you can go to the backup and restore it. It's only a 30 terabyte database. It won't take very long. Or wait, oh yeah, it will take forever. But having a source control for your database code is not only a backup, and it is a backup, guys. Just think about it as a backup. Don't think about it as source control management. Don't think about it as a way to, have, tracking of who made what change. Don't think about it as a way for the auditors to know how stuff was implemented. None of that's important. Just think about it as that undo button in your database. Just think about that backup. That in and of itself is a reason to get source control involved in your databases. Because if you can get an additional backup on your databases, it's better. It's just more methodologies of faster recovery in the case of an emergency. That's what source control is all about. But also, by the way, it does give you the ability to see who made that change. When was that change made? Did they comment why they made the change? We've got the ability through source control to actually have a tighter understanding of the changes going into your database, what, when, how, where, and why those changes occurred right out of the source control system. Assuming you do one really hard thing, which is assume that if it's not in source control, it doesn't exist. And that's a tough choice, but that's the way to do it. If you can make that leap, you're better off. Any yelling or screaming yet?
There are some comments in here. Let's see. Humans are key. Communicating is the hard part. Being consistent is where we come in. And on this specifically, you're talking about the schema here, not the user data.
Not the data. No. That's a standard backup.
Yeah. DBAs don't use source control.
So start.
Well, that was a question, not a statement. It was from a developer.
Yeah, DBAs do not use source control. Oh yeah. Lots and lots of DBAs do not use source control.
And source control, that's what SP help text from dev is, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's it exactly. Whoever said that, well done. No. But anyway, moving on. Okay, cool. All right, so next, shift left. And shift left is hard. This is, one of the harder things of all of this. Honest to God, it is. I get it. Shift left is hard. So you're probably not going to get it perfect, and that's fine. Get it as close as you can. Well, production looks like this, and we can't implement that in a non-production environment. Okay, understood. Get as close as you can. And that has to be the motto over and over again. As close as we can, as close as we can, as close as we can. Granted, if you get it down to where, we're running it on a, it's the dev machine for doing the integration testing is a 8-year-old tablet. Okay, I don't think that's as close to production as you can get, right? So there's a happy medium between the 8-year-old tablet, and a 64-core machine, right? Find that happy medium in the middle and get that implemented. I get it. You've got a 50 terabyte database. You can't put copies of it in pre-prod, QA, testing, integration testing, development, and then on every single developer servers. I understand. There are tools out there that can help with some of that, or you will have to dummy out data or do whatever processes that you have to do to support establishing the shift left mentality, because there are some huge benefits. First up, as close as you can get to production means every test you run in these non-production environments is adding assurances that when you get to production, everything's going to work. So you're testing earlier. You're not testing simply on production. You're testing ahead of production because you want to test before you get to production. Like the first time you run code should not be on your production server. Ever. I mean, okay, maybe at 3 a.m. when everything's on fire. Okay, fine. But all of the other stuff, especially the day in, day out, all the code deployments and all the rest of that stuff, that should be run someplace else before you ever get to production. Also, a shift left mentality allows us to fail faster. We want to fail as early in this process as humanly possible. If there's a bad bit of code, you want to identify it, if you can, the moment it gets written. If not, the moment it goes through a CI/CD process. If not, the moment it hits the QA team. You want to fail as fast as you can. That is a fundamental aspect of this, so you're not wasting your time promulgating code that sucks. Also, shift left allows for more frequent deployments. Again, Do we have to deploy 15 times a day? Well, we're doing DevOps 15 times a day minimum. No, no, no. It doesn't work like that. But every 6 months is way too slow. The business is moving faster than that. You can't say that that's an acceptable methodology. Once a month is probably not an acceptable methodology for most businesses. We are talking once every couple of weeks, once a fortnight, once a week. We've got to get to the ability where we can have frequent deployments. Shift left supports that mechanism. And this one I just love, because the more we can put something that resembles production directly in front of the developers, the more they're going to learn. The more they learn, the more they can deal with this stuff. And you really, really need to automate your shift left mentality, mechanisms. It's the evening. Still haven't had any wine, and I'm messing the words up. My gosh, this is bad. Self-service is vital, because when developer A burns his system to the ground, I don't want to get a phone call, because I don't care, right? That's his problem or her problem. Doesn't matter. Self-service, they can rebuild that system. It's going to look as much like production as we can get it, and they've got it. And maybe they'll learn not to burn it to the ground next time. Maybe that drop database statement was a bad choice, and they'll figure those things out and learn from them before they get to production. So that's the whole idea here, is to add protection to our production environment. Any on this one?
No.
Cool. So next up is automated testing. Now, automated testing means protection for production. Everything I do around DevOps, when I'm talking about it as a DBA, I emphasize over and over again, all of this is adding testing for production. Now, here's the only hard part. What do we test? Now, I'm the idiot, and I use that phrase freely, who sat down and wrote a unit test for every single database script I had. And it was the biggest waste of time I've ever done. Well, maybe not ever, but it was a big waste of time. And it also hurt us. It caused database deployments to slow down because the testing took so long. And I was testing all the wrong things. Because let's face it, a create table statement doesn't need a test. Now, an alter table statement might, but a create table statement is going to fail or it's going to pass, and we're done. And that's it. It's just, there's not a need for a test on every single thing that you do. But instead, focus on the stuff that's either likely to break or actually breaks. As soon as something breaks in dev or CI or QA, build a test. Because if you broke it there, it's likely to break in prod. Therefore, we need a test for it. It's that simple. Any test we build, if it's a good test, every single one adds protection to our production environment. And it's just about building that safety for production. It's about making it so that we can, not saying that we should, but we can deploy once a day, twice a day, more. And not saying even that we will, but if we've got to the point where we know we've got enough testing in place where we could say, like, oh gosh, there was a real serious problem last night. Proc A failed. Let's put a change in for Proc A, run it through the tests, and put it in prod. And do that in, 10 or 15 minutes. It's possible. It's doable. A lot of people can and do make that kind of thing happen, but it's by having the confidence in your process brought about by automating all your testing that allows that to occur. Without all the automation and the testing, you just won't get there. And you won't get there. So, more frequent deployments. The reason we do more frequent deployments, and maybe that's only in QA, lots in QA, lots in pre-prod, one every so often in prod, fine. But every single deployment's a test. Every single deployment is practice. And practice is fundamental to mastery. You don't become good at anything doing it once. And so if you're running code for the first time on prod, well, you haven't practiced that code. It might work, it might not, but the fact is you don't know. It's just a wild gamble and a wild guess, and maybe it'll work out and maybe it won't. And yay, we win, yay team. But seriously, we want to have protection for our production environment, and one of the most fundamental protections is doing the deployments multiple times so we can spot where, ooh, wow, when we run this script against this table, it takes hours to finish the deployment. We should look into that and figure out why. Right. But we found that out before we locked up the production server for hours at a time. So we've got to be able to get to the place where we're doing these things more and more and more. And this supports shift left, and shift left supports this, and automated testing supports this, and this supports automated testing. Because if we're able to do all of these three things together, all we're doing is building out that protective blanket for our production systems. I mean, I can't say it any other way, really. Then we've got to do monitoring. And that means, yeah, sure, monitoring the production servers, and that's fine, but understanding also the behavior of your systems on non-production servers. So how are things happening before we make the change? How are they happening after? Geez, it didn't improve. Okay, cool. Let's not make that change. We need to know when deployments occur as part of our monitoring. Yes, I want to automate as much of this stuff as possible, but I also want it to be documented and marked in such a way that we can know that 3 a.m. last night, a new deployment occurred. It shouldn't be an active discovery. Really? There was a deployment last week? No. We should always be knowing. And also because monitoring, especially monitoring in production, drives innovation. Monitoring is what lets us know when things are running poorly, when things are going slower than they used to, and we need to make a change in the structure, adding indexes, changing the code. And all of the protection that we've been talking about throughout this lesson all starts with monitoring, all starts with understanding how the system is behaving. So this is just a fundamental aspect of it. So all the time that you guys have already spent setting up your monitoring, yay, you're ahead of the game. Now you kind of do also have to do shift left and look at some, not the same, certainly not the same, but some monitoring in your non-production environments for a lot of the same reasons as to why you monitor your production environment. How are we doing on all this stuff?
Doing well. There's a little bit of discussion here about figuring out how to get a non-prod system close to a prod system, given the level of complexity of setup.
Well, yeah, I mean, links, servers, replication. I mean, I know all the horror shows, all the horror stories. I've either lived them or I've had to deal with them as a consultant. But yeah, the trick is finding making as much of it as you can, as close as you can, and that may mean using some synonyms to fake out link servers that you can't link to, all kinds of other fun stuff, or even building not a database but like 8 or 9 databases as part of a single deployment. That's the kind of stuff that people do. Cool. All right. So next thing is like, let's talk about tools. Tools matter, and there are tools that are in DevOps, and those tools are not easy. So we'll start off with the fundamentals, right? Source control and flow control. Source control is simple, right? It's Git. There's no other tool out there. No, I'm kidding. There are other tools out there, but most people, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 80-something% of places now are using some flavor of Git, whether it's Git, GitHub, or one of the other ones. Git seems to have won the source control war, at least temporarily. Although there are quite a few people still using TFS, although a lot of people using TFS are actually using Git under the covers and think they're using TFS because Microsoft supports Git now. Anyway, and then Subversion. I kind of don't care which one we use. What I do lean heavily towards is using one source control system. And I know companies that use multiple ones and they make it work. But most successful organizations find a source control system and use the one. The reason for that is that it makes it easier to communicate. And it also makes it easier to track changes, makes it easier to track who's made the changes, all the fun stuff. It's simpler with one. That's not to say that the database projects have to go in with the application projects. You can separate the two. I lean towards wanting them together, but I know why people will separate them out, and I'm not going to argue that point in a big way. Like I said, I lean towards it, but it's not the hill I plan to die on. There's other hills I will die on, but not that one. So first off, pick a source control system, whatever it is. Next up, flow control. Now, I've worked personally with cruise control, which I'm not crazy about, but I've worked with it. I've worked with Team City, which is awesome. I've worked with Azure DevOps, which I love to death. I have worked with Octopus, which is also wonderful because it's PowerShell, PowerShell, PowerShell. So yay, we win. And I've worked with Jenkins, which is great, if a little weird. Also not on the list, AWS pipelines. I've just built my very first AWS pipeline last week, and it's shockingly good. But you've got to find a flow control system. Now, do you have to pick one like the source control system? Honestly, no. You can use more than one, but here's where tooling gets stupid difficult. Flow control systems are hard. I mean, cruise control is pretty easy, but it's also pretty limited in what it can do. Team City is challenging to use. All the rest of the ones that I've listed up there, Azure DevOps, Octopus, Jenkins, AWS pipelines, difficult. Not simply challenging, difficult. Lots and lots and lots of moving parts. Lots and lots and lots of weird coding, YAML and JSON. Yay, let's just take all the stuff I hate and put it in one place. Lots and lots of these kinds of things all combined up. They're not easy to use. They're not easy to control. You are going to have to spend some time learning these tools. So probably you're better off only using one or maybe two because they're hard. I mean, it's just no other way to put it. They're hard. This is tough stuff, and they involve just so many moving parts. And then you automate the heck out of it. So these are two of the things that you're going to have to look at for DevOps tooling. Now, next up, there's one bit of magic. And this is an unavoidable bit of magic because databases have this weird thing called persistence. And you have to deal with persistence. You have to deal with the fact that it's not like code, that you have to have something change a table in a way that doesn't involve dropping that table and recreating it. You need the data to stick around. There's actually a typo on the screen. It's not fly away, it's flyway. But anyway, these are some of the tools that do this stuff. Now, I work for a vendor who's on this list, so I'm not going to get into screaming and yelling about which of these tools are best. You know my opinion. What I will say is that most of these tools do a good job. And there's a few other tools I don't have on the list here. And I think one or two of these might have gone away. But you need to have this one bit of magic. This is the tricky part about databases. We can't simply install the same way as you install a DLL or a app server or any of that kind of stuff. Ours requires a little bit more because we've got to deal with transactions and the data, and we've got to protect the data. And now, whether or not you're using one of these tools to compare two sources, compare to source control to your database, and then using that compare, generate a script, or whether you're using one of these tools to do, to create a manifest, and then run that manifest in a particular order. And by the way, these are those two ideas of that comparison process or the manifest process are generally called state-based, meaning comparing two states, or migrations-based, meaning a set of scripts that migrate you from one state to another. Which of those two you use, I'm not going to argue a whole lot. I would say, in my opinion, in 2020, I think that the migrations approach is more mature than the state approach, but that's not to say the state approach does not work. It does. So there's no issues there. It's also not to say that the migrations approach doesn't have shortcomings. It does. The big shortcoming to the migrations approach, that manifest of changes, is that your manifest could be quite large, and you're sort of effectively moving dev into prod. And by that, I mean, let's face it, dev is a little bit of cowboy land, and intentionally so, and good, right? This is not throwing rocks at developers. This is saying, look, you're experimenting. Hey, let me add the column. Oh, no, that didn't work. Let me drop the column. No, I don't like it either. Let me add the column. Let me drop it. No, let me add it. That's fine. But when that hits the 500 million row table in production, and you add, drop that column, that deployment's going to be a nightmare. And so migrations is a little creepy because it could let that kind of stuff happen. So you sort of have to deal with that methodology around migrations. Whereas migrations also solves a lot of problems that state, that comparison mechanism introduced. So, you guys pick and choose your poison, but you're going to need to use one of these tools. I promise you will. Or you have to do what I did at the beginning of my DevOps journey and build a tool. I didn't build it myself, I won't say that, but I helped build a migrations approach. I helped build a manifest methodology 15 years ago. And we used it for almost 5 years before I left the organization. It worked. It was a heck of a lot of work to build, and then a stupid amount of work to maintain. If any of these tools had existed then, I would have bought one of them, but none of them did. So we had to do our own thing. But now you guys have the capability to get at these tools. And frankly, what is it? SQL Server Data Tools is kind of free if you have a Visual Studio license. DBUp is freeware, and Flyway is freeware. So, I'm sorry, DBUp is open source and Flyway is open source. So, because they both also have pay versions, but there's ways to get at this stuff for no cost. So there's at least a way to get started. So you can get into all these mechanisms. By the way, SQL Server Data Tools is state-based. DBUp and Flyway are both migrations-based. Awesome. So the light at the end of the tunnel. So these are the fundamentals of DevOps, right? Communication is just so core. All the code goes into source control. We shift left to ensure that we can get to where we're protecting our production systems. We automate our tests so that we're protecting our production systems. We automate our deployments so that we're protecting our production systems, and then we put monitoring in place. And frankly, if you think about it as a database DevOps, it's database fundamentals too. We are talking about the fact that we are a single team, right? It's one team. It's not, that's those devs over there. We don't talk to them, we just recently watched the movie Life of Brian in my house, and hopefully that doesn't offend anyone, but I love the scene when they're talking about, the people's front of Judea versus the Judean people's front. We're not going to go down that road. That's a bad communication. Instead, we're going to have one team. We're going to move to source control because source control gives us more backups. Yes, it also gives us auditing capability. It gives us change tracking. We get to figure out when Timmy made that bad choice. Absolutely. All of that is great from source control. All of that is good from source control. It gives us an undo button, right? That's all great. But more importantly, it gives us a backup, a very readily accessible backup, something that may not take hours to quickly find some code that we need. Shift left adds protection. That's just the easiest way to think about it. Shift left adds protection. So more protection means a safer production environment. We're able to arrive at a place where we're talking about protection. Automated testing is not automated testing. It's automated protection. It's another way to ensure that we are ensuring that the code that goes out the door is better, is high quality, has been vetted, has run through the tests because we knew it failed early because of our shift left mechanism. We then wrote a test for it to ensure that it didn't fail again, or if it failed, we knew it failed, and we wrote code around it to ensure that it wouldn't fail. We've done the hard work, we've created the automated testing, and so now we've got automated protection. Frankly, automating your deployments means practicing your deployments, and practicing your deployments means going on the path to mastery, getting better, right? Do 10,000 deployments so that I'm good at deployments. Don't just do one on production, do a lot of them. And then monitoring's monitoring. Monitoring doesn't have any major magic switch between the two, right? It's kind of sad. I need to come up with some magic for monitoring. I don't have any. It's just something we have to do. Monitoring's work. All the rest of this stuff is fun. Monitoring's just labor. But that's it. So hopefully in the 51 minutes that this took, we hit these goals. And you guys heard the message the way I'm telling it to dev teams, because this is what I'm telling your developers. I'm not trying to hide this stuff from you, but I talk to them in dev conferences and in dev sessions separate from you because you're not there. And I'm not picking on you when I say that. I'm just telling you the facts. When I'm there by myself with them, and so I talk to them and I let them know what I think, because I've been doing this stuff for 15 years and I've been doing it successfully. So I really love this stuff and I really try to emphasize how good it is. Now I'm going to open it up for questions here in just a minute. I just got a couple more slides I want to run through. This is this week, July 22nd and 23rd. The US is supposed to be on the 23rd, I think. There's an early morning one on the 22nd for the EU if you want. The Redgate Summit's taking place this week, and you guys can register for it. There's not a link here. That's just a picture. And what we're talking about is how database DevOps enables you to do more with less. And then we're also having a summer campfire chat about data. So hopefully you guys will take part in that. That, I believe, yeah, okay, that's all I have. So I've got what, 7 minutes. Cool, that's not bad. Are there questions? Oh, here, I'll leave it on that slide.
So far, one question. How do you motivate a team stuck in the year 2011 that the way of DevOps is going to help their life, not make it harder?
They're in 2011. That's great. They're doing really well. Most of the teams I talked to are still in 1998. All right, well, here, let me tell you a dirty secret about DevOps and about doing DevOps consulting. I fail more often than I succeed. So I've seen DevOps projects fail more often than I've seen them succeed. However, that's not the reason to not try. In fact, that's pretty much the reason to try. If your company fails a DevOps implementation, you need more DevOps, right? You need to figure out why and how you weren't able to find that collaborative methodology that allowed you guys to automate your processes. That's an indicator, right? So how do you motivate them? Well, hopefully some of the language I use tonight can help, because the idea of doing things the way we used to do it, right? Well, I wrote this script and it seems to work and I'm going to run it in production. Wait, what? Stop. What? You said what? No, 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 no. Or, well, I ran it on QA once. We restored QA from production about 9 months ago. It's probably close. No, it's probably not. So wait, can we, again, wait. Let's talk, because the ideas are simple. The ideas are not complicated. I mean, the implementation of this is incredibly complicated, but the idea is so simple. Let's communicate better and let's automate our stuff so we make fewer mistakes. Okay, let's do that. I mean, because oh, by the way, it has a name. It's called DevOps, but don't worry about that. Let's just communicate better and then automate the things that we do. I mean, that's the only thing I would say is that, do that. But the biggest thing you can do is find a champion. If you're the champion, great, but you need to find some help. You need to find a management champion. Um, I've got a full day session I do on this, and I talk about how to implement DevOps. And the biggest thing you can do is do a top-down, meet in the middle kind of thing, meaning there's somebody on your team that loves DevOps, and there's somebody in management that loves DevOps, and the two of you communicate your way through the teams and meet in the middle, so that you're lifting the team up from the bottom and they are dropping manna down from heaven so that you guys can get this implemented. Find another champion, preferably one in management, and talk as much as you possibly can about protection. And yeah, that's it, protection. Because if you talk about speed, it upsets people. So don't talk about speed. That scares people. Are you going to get speed? Yeah, you are. But that's a side benefit. Talk about protection. Talk about the fact that it adds protection. Best of all, find your most recent failed deployment and document how much time it took, how much outage you had, how much time it took to fix, all the issues around that, and say, like, wouldn't it have been nice to skip all this junk and do something better? If anyone else has any suggestions, though, I'm all ears, because selling this stuff is actually kind of difficult. And I don't mean selling the products. I mean selling the concept.
True. What kinds of considerations would a team take to determine state-based versus migration-based deployments? Any tips
Ooh.
of things to consider?
Okay, that's hard. Personally, I would suggest you pick up the tools and try them out. See how it works. See what it does. The frequently the state-based, everybody's comfortable with it because it's easy to understand. The migrations approach, like whether you're using something like DB-up or Flyway, the migrations approach looks weird. It acts a little odd, and you're kind of going, wait a minute, how's it know? You know what I mean? And why is that working? And oh wait, you're telling me I have to write the script? I don't want to write the script. And the fact is you actually have to do a little bit more work with the migrations approach, because you get to control the bad scripts, the scripts that the change approach will just it's just going to break the database, no big deal. Like, for example, SQL Server data tools, it has a mechanism, and it will either not deploy. Oh, I can't deploy because that will break the database. Or you can tell it, it's okay, break the database anyway. Wait, what? Stop again. Let's stop here for a second. Whereas with migrations, when you hit that hard deployment, you have to write the script. Cool. I know how to write the script so the database doesn't break. Awesome. Write that script, put it in the right place in the migrations, and ta-da, database is not broken. So suddenly you kind of see what the beauty of the migrations approach is. But test them both. That's the best thing you can do. But give it a fair test. The first few times you run migrations, you're going to hate it. Probably. Maybe not. Depends.
I think it's fair. We use migration-based deployments, and it takes some getting used to.
Yeah,
it feels like you're doing twice as much work.
I was quite reluctant to embrace it, I gotta say. I mean, I was reluctant to embrace DevOps back when we first started doing it. When they were saying, like, oh, we're going to automate our deployments, I started laughing. You're not going to automate deployments for a database. Stop. And finally I got on board and started helping instead of just standing there saying no. And sure enough, we automated deployments for databases. It was work, don't get me wrong, but it's doable.
Well, speaking of automation, the next question is, where do you start automating? It's hard to do it all at the same time.
Yeah, don't. Um, so I recommend 2 steps and only 2 steps, and figure out these steps, get them down cold. Get your database into source control so that you can put it in and take it out. And so that means getting one of the magic tools, whichever tool you want, one of the magic tools, and build a CI process, a continuous integration process, so that when you commit your code to source control, it automatically takes it out of source control and builds a database someplace. No data in it, nothing complicated. Don't make it hard, make it simple. My database is in source control. I have a CI process. Get those 2 things working. Then start looking at all the rest of the crap. That's enough work probably for the next 6 weeks for most people. Smart people, 3 weeks, but most of the rest of us, 6 weeks.
Okay. What communication patterns do you use with teams in your successful processes? Not just posting
Just
stuff
the
to
success.
SharePoint.
Don't tell you about the failed ones. Just tell me about the successful ones. Honest to God, it's the same ones. I use the same ones for the successful ones and the failed ones. It's about establishing evidence. So what we found is, and there's multiple surveys and there's multiple studies that support this, successful IT teams are using some form of DevOps. Whether they call it that or not, different discussion. Successful teams are using it. Just like anything else, if you want to be let's say you're crazy and you want to be an MVP, how do you become an MVP? Emulate what the MVPs are doing, right? Do what they do. How do you become a successful team? Emulate what the successful teams are doing. Successful teams are, and there's documents all over the place to support this. They are automating their deployments. They are using shift left. They are working out of source control, right? All of the stuff that we kind of went over tonight, that's what successful teams are doing. And so emulate them. That's the message that I try to communicate. After that, it's about how do we emulate, and that all gets into consulting. Because frequently, here's how it goes on the failed projects: is we come in, we sit down, we give them the pitch, just like I've just given you on terms of And again, this isn't talking about selling tools; it's talking about selling the process. Talking about the process, we give them the pitch. We talk about how they have their process today and where their bottlenecks are today. And so we collect a lot of information. And then I will go back and I will say, okay, cool. So they're hitting bottlenecks here, here, and here, and it's documented. And here's where they're failing, where they have failed deployments on a regular basis. And here's where they've lost outages. And okay, so what can we modify and how can we change the process? And who could communicate to each other better in such a way that all this stuff. And you walk back in and you say, okay, cool. Now we've talked about a bunch of stuff, guys, yesterday. Today I want to talk about changes we could make, and here's why. And you show this is the bottleneck that you hit, and here's where you crash all the time. And if we could just change this one thing, you wouldn't crash over here. And the successful teams go, oh man, we didn't see that. Cool, awesome. And they go off and implement the change. Unsuccessful teams go, oh yeah, that's cool, but we always do it that way. And we're done. Because that's going to be a failed process, because as soon as we always do it that way is the argument, we're over. Because we always do it that way is not an argument. That's not even a defense. It's just, okay, cool. You always hit your finger with the hammer. Your finger will hurt less if you stop hitting it with the hammer. Yeah, but I always do it that way. I got nothing for you. It's like, I don't know how to help you after that. But that's usually the death knell. As soon as you hear we always do it that way, when you propose a change, that's the end. But other than that, it's all about getting the team on the idea that we are going to change because it's necessary.
Oh, now we've got a sad story in chat about
Oh
same
no.
person for automation. They use numbered stored procedures, which I had to look up because I had never actually dealt with this. Also, it's been deprecated in SQL Server for quite some time.
Yeah, it has been deprecated for a long time. I learned about it years and years ago and then forgot about it. Um, and then relearned about it just a couple of weeks ago. I hope this isn't the same person because I told them bad things online. I mean, not incorrect things, but I told them just stop doing that. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh no, no, he's not in favor of it.
Oh, good. Okay, yeah. So this is definitely not the person I talked to.
No, no, it's more of, hey, when you've got very complex environments, and also there's a bit of size comparison for number of lines of code that people have.
Oh, jeez.
But those look like the major questions.
Okay, well, cool. Well, hopefully this was helpful. I mean, again, I tried to not talk to you guys the way I normally do. I tried to talk to you guys the way I talk to the developers and give you guys the message I was giving them because frankly, developers have embraced DevOps. They understand not everybody, and there's a few of the crazy developers who are like, yeah, get us A privileges. Um, they make me insane. But they really have embraced DevOps, and they've been working on it for well over a decade now, and they're getting pretty good at it. And we just need to incorporate in what we do. That's my biggest argument.
Yeah, it looks like there's got questions coming under the wire. By the way,
Yeah.
he says his company's the opposite. He wants DevOps and CI/CD, but the developers are refusing.
Wow. Okay, that's rare.
So when on dev, how do you go about sharing or not sharing private API keys to third-party providers, like say your SMTP provider?
Don't. Um, that's a trickier thing. You have to figure that one out. Don't share anything confidential. Certainly don't violate the GDPR. I mean, nothing in any of the stuff that I've proposed is none of it should change your security patterns. If anything, it should enhance them. Um, you know, no, you shouldn't be doing anything like that. We'd have to have a longer discussion as to what, how, and why around it to give you a good answer. Unless Kevin, you've got one. I don't know right off the top of my head.
Not offhand. I'd have to think about it. Um, and there was a follow-up question about covering the when devs refuse a little bit more. So if they're the blockers as opposed to, say, the DBAs.
Well, again, find a champion. Find one of the devs who's not crazy, because that's an abnormal stance for a development team. It really is. So probably there's one or two people on top driving it. Find the one or two people in the middle or on the bottom who are like, well, yeah, of course we should be doing DevOps. My God, they're there. I guarantee it. Find those and say, like, I need you to help me out. We can make this happen. You're going to be my champion. Let's make it happen. Because here's a lesson I learned a long time ago, and I forget it every once in a while, and I really wish I should write it down. There's two kinds of power in your organization. There's organizational power, and that's the stuff that the boss says you're in charge of this, and so now that from an organizational standpoint, you have power. And there's personal power in your organization. You can build personal power way beyond your organizational power. You can influence more than you think you can. You can actually implement a lot of changes within your organization. You just have to be willing to take the risk to step up and say, like, I've got this idea. I really think we need to explore it. Here's why, here's how. I think we can do it with, minimal cost, with minimal pain. Let's look at this for our next project, or hey, you know what, maybe this could help us with the problem that we're having. You can, with personal power, influence change within the organization. You don't have to have institutional power to do it. I got that lesson from a boss of mine. I literally went in and said, look, I've got this fantastic idea. Here's what has to happen. I want you to make it happen. And he's like, I got other things to do. You go make it happen. And you know what I mean? I'm like, wait a minute, how do I do that? And he mentored me through the process, but it worked. So it's why I bring it up over and over again. It really does work. And gosh, even like a few months ago, I had my boss come up to me and go, "Why aren't you making this kind of why aren't you making this kind of pitch inside the company?" And I went, "Oh, did I forget my lesson again?" Sure enough, I did. I made the pitch. We made a change. So yeah, it's a lesson to learn. Don't assume that your job is just the immediate things in front of you. You can do more than you think you can, and organizations want you to.
Yeah. Are there any types of metrics that you use to help convince people?
Mostly, there's a whole bunch of there's the state of database DevOps survey with Redgate, and that's got a whole bunch of data in it. It's free to download. I'm not selling anything. Go grab it and get a hold of that. That will help. But the main thing I measure is pain in your organization. How many deployments do we do? How fast do they occur? How many people are involved? How often do we go down? Um, how often does the business want us to make changes? And how often do we tell them no, we can't because it's hard? I mean, identify the organization issues. That's the best way to do it. The pain that you're experiencing, because a lot of that pain that an organization will experience is it's pain that they're used to. I'm accustomed to this pain, therefore I don't have to worry about it anymore. And they're not acknowledging the fact that really you could do more if we kind of eliminated these pain points. And you have to identify them first. That's usually the biggest way to start to sell it. Is not simply say, well, it's better and you can go faster and blah blah blah, but go like, look, we hit this issue all the time and we can eliminate it with some automation.
That makes sense. Um, Looks like we are running out of questions.
Cool. Well,
By which
feel
I mean
free
we've
to
run out of
reach
questions.
out if anyone has more. Please swing by the summit, or better still, send your boss to this one, because these are meant to be a bit more C-level. Um, but regardless,
All right. Thank you so much, Grant. By the way, several people in chat were saying very interesting, outstanding. Thank you.
oh, cool. Oh,
They
no, thank
will
you all.
not mail packages to your house full of disgusting things.
Good.
They were probably going to before the stream, but you convinced them not to.
Oh, okay. Oh, good. That's good to hear.
So with that, we are going to wrap up tonight's edition of the Triangle Area SQL Server User Group. Thank you once again, Grant, for the outstanding presentation tonight.
Oh, no
Recording
problem.
recording will be available, and in case you wanted to watch it again or try to convince those uh, recalcitrant developers that they really need to get on board with this thing.
Yeah.
So with that, everybody have a wonderful evening.